So we meet for our final round after two very interesting, fascinating days. To summarize a little bit and to look forward. So my first question to you and to me is, in these 2 days, what was especially impressing, interesting, and is there something like a synthesis from these very different perspectives of relationship of faith and nation in Israel, in Poland, in Germany, in Ukraine, in Russia? Unfortunately, not everybody of the referents of the lecturers was able to stay here, but we are able to have our own thoughts and to share them. So, what was important in these 2 days? As an experience, as reflection. Someone wants to begin?
I'm happy to begin. A lot was important over the last couple of days. I was here under the shadow of two wars. The geographical proximity of this place to the camp was obviously it was one of the reasons that I felt that I wanted to cut. Okay, all right. Being where this place is situated was something that attracted me to the possibility of coming. I had no idea what I would experience or find. And as I say, also under the shadow of a war that's raging where I live, with all of the concerns, including concerns relating directly to the topic of these last couple of days, of the interface between issues of nation and of faith. I'm reflecting on it. I thought the other presentations were really excellent and informative. Listening to them, I felt that I had been a little bit off focus in the sense that I did not really tell a story about religion and state in contemporary Israel. And that is a very interesting story to be told, but that's not what I ended up doing. And perhaps in the written version of this, I'll try to rectify that to some degree. I was thinking a lot during the deliberations, actually, about political theology, about Carl Schmitt, and the whole question of how each of our nations understands itself politically, with both explicit and implicit religious and theological dimensions. These issues are crucial at the moment in Israel, where everything is up in the air. What kind of society are we going to be? In the last few years, a great rise actually of a certain kind of militant religious national identity. Anyway, it was very valuable, very interesting. I came with those two shadows, and I'm leaving with those two shadows, but also having met really interesting people and heard interesting ideas, and trying to think how to kind of digest all of this and synthesize it. I can't give a synthesis yet, but I think there is a synthesis to be had of all of these conversations.
Yeah, actually, in my mind, it's the question of nationalism was a red, like a what is it, a rote Faden, a red. What is it in English? Where's a red? No, no, yeah, yeah, the thread, the red thread of those days, and it occupies me more and more concerning, well, our situation in Germany in the context of Europe and what happens there. We have the election soon. Our family history personally is very much connected with France. So we grew up. Our children, for them, it's nation and nationalism and border controls were never a topic. But in the last years, I see or last 2 years only, I see also in the conversations with my children and their friends that this rises again. The Selbstverständlichkeit, this self-evident feeling of my generation, maybe not everybody in my generation, but something seems to be changed, and there are political powers in the background and also cultural powers, which are sort of which make me a little bit uncomfortable, because I don't see what are the religious elements within this, because German Catholic or German Protestant culture, at least, are always mixed in those movements. But because we are now quite officially a secular society, you have really to look more precise, more exactly where they are. You don't find them like in the 19th century and earlier century, but they are there. For example, the demonstrations in Dresden are famous for this, but that's the Pegida. That was rather after 2015. They had the Christian symbols. So for us as the normal people from the church, it was astonishing that they take over the Christianity. We are speaking for the Christian churches now. Against the migrants. This was 2015 in this context, for example. And the political results of the last elections, of the regional elections, are also are not, how do you say, are making me a little speechless. Also in the West, it's not only the eastern regions. For example, the region of Hessen around Frankfurt, the right wing, the right extremist party has already the second place, and so on. So, well, I don't. This real actual situation, I have difficulty to bring this still together in my mind with the question of faith. Dialogue-oriented faith.
But did you learn something from listening to the others here?
I don't know yet. I don't know yet. Did I?
Oh, okay. Thank you. So, one of the listeners of the public has some impression to share. Od początku.
Finally. When I was listening to all the different voices, it was extremely rich for me, and actually I would wish that many other people and universities were here and listened to it, because it was really a chance to listen to people rooted in their own country and nationality, nation, at the same time speaking about their relation toward faith. And I heard many things in common. Some things were actually relating to threats where the faith can lead to it. And this, I was thinking, in every country that we heard, every nation had some of those in the past, but also today. And there were also lots of things that gave me hope and signs of hope how to work with the nation, wherever we are in our context, with the religion, with the faith. At the same time, I had lots of questions how to work, and maybe later we will talk about, because we have a radicalization not only on the political level, going right-wing, but in our religious communities, it's also going right-wing. And we are losing from the institutional institutions, from the church especially, people the central and left wing, and instead we have more right wing, and that worries me, because this will impact, it might impact the nation as well, and because those people might be in government and so on. So how to form communities and church and synagogue, and that would have all kinds of people, that there would be this, what in Catholic Church we are talking now about synod, that there is diversity, and somehow we can influence one another, listening to one another and learn. And I really, Michael, actually, I really value, I am theologian, I'm not political theologian, so your presentation was very valuable for me, and I was really thinking this reinterpretation of the segula as adaptation, because I think we need to keep the core values of our traditions, but bring them into modernity, and also to the people where they are in their milieu. And some of them there will be secular, and some of them they will be right-wing people. So that's how to adapt, if we are people of faith, whatever it means, how to adapt our values to that. It's something attractive that we can share ethics and moral, which is not necessarily religious, but they're the core human values that would help us to build a society that we will have no wars. Small and big ones. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to respond. Maybe, yeah, this brings me on an idea. I think, well, we stand a little bit for the official religions or faith in our cultures, in our cultures. But we. We are trained here, especially in this group, but in the ICCJ and where we are active, always to include this perspective on the other. Certainly on a personal level, I think this is quite accepted. On the collective level, it gets more difficult and complicated, but I think often in the German context, and people tell me this also after services or in events in the churches, faith is also something what we call in the German language Heimat. What is Heimat? Can you homeland metaphorically? And maybe we didn't evaluate this. Or didn't pay enough attention also to this need that faith has to give a homeland, to be a homeland for for the people. And this will be different in Israel, in the Jewish context, or in Poland, in a Catholic, dominated Catholic context, or in the North Germany in a dominated Protestant context. And how can we bring those two things together? Because biographically, of course, I come from a family very Protestant. My parents were active. It was our homeland. All my three sisters, we were all active in the church. It was also like a family or a homeland. It was not always looking for the other also, or for, yeah. But I see now that you can combine it, and I have combined it in my biography, but maybe I need to come back to the also to this homeland aspect, without becoming nationalist or against the other. That's the challenge.
I think I will speak more fluently in Polish, more from the depth of heart. To jest trudne dla mnie, bo tak, było bardzo ciekawie usłyszeć te wszystkie perspektywy. Natomiast może powiem jedną rzecz, zanim o tych rzeczach teoretycznych, bo jakoś noszę w sobie dzisiaj od przedpołudnia moje przeżycie z medytacji w obozie. Ja zawsze to mówię moim przyjaciołom, wiem, że tu trzeba przyjeżdżać, a nie lubię tu przyjeżdżać, bo obóz jest tak makabryczną rzeczywistością, że ja się zawsze czuję jakoś psychicznie chory po wyjściu stąd, ale dziś się zdarzył mały cud. Dziś się zdarzył mały cud, bo kiedy doszliśmy do końca i Michael śpiewał El Mare Hamim, chyba po raz pierwszy jako dorosły człowiek nie wstydziłem się płakać przy ludziach. Ale miałem takie poczucie, że te łzy moje i Michaela może się jednak trochę połączyły w jeden strumień i mnie to uzdrowiło trochę. Znaczy wracaliśmy do bramy i miałem w sobie taką cichutką myśl, że jednak życie zwycięża. Mimo wszystko. I to jest taka jedna myśl, że tak powiem, mistyczna. Natomiast też przy całej wartości wszystkiego, co tu usłyszałem, chciałbym się bardzo inspirować tym, co mówił Michael. Byłem pod wrażeniem tego, jak on umie zniuansować spojrzenie na własny naród, własną ojczyznę. I jak o tym myślę, to mi się przypomina coś, co chyba André Chouraki napisał gdzieś, że taką misją Żydów jest pilnować innych przed bałwochwalstwem. I tak sobie myślę, ja bym się chciał uczyć trochę z tej perspektywy i Michaela, i w ogóle żydowskiej, że naprawdę tylko Haszem jest Bogiem. Nie ma innego absolutu. Czyli na przykład moja ojczyzna nie jest absolutem. Ona jest ważna, ale nie jest absolutem. Mój naród nie jest absolutem. I myślę też o tej interpretacji Amsegula, bo też mi się bardzo podoba ta myśl, że to chodzi raczej o powołanie. I ja bym chciał, bo no wiemy jak jest na świecie, jak jest w Polsce, jak jest w różnych miejscach, że rosną takie ekstremizmy, że ludzie jakoś tak szukają tożsamości właśnie w takich ostrych formach od odróżniania się od innych, a nawet antagonizowania. I myślę, że ja bym się chciał bardzo uczyć tego, znowu powiem, może nie jest to odkrywcze, ale to jest ważne, przede wszystkim tej etyki dekalogu. My to musimy mieć. Ja nie mogę też zapomnieć, że tuż przed tą modlitwą, którą Michael śpiewał na końcu, ja czytałem, tak wyszło, Manfred mnie poprosił, ja czytałem to świadectwo o dziewczynie, która powiedziała, że lżej jej umierać, bo ktoś płacze. To był ludzki odruch. I chyba nie ma nic ważniejszego niż uczyć ludzi ludzkich odruchów. To ja takich parę myśli mam. Thank you.
Nie wiem. To jest trudne, tak jak dla wszystkich. Na pewno zawsze tutaj ta droga w Brzezińce jest czymś takim wstrząsającym i trudnym. Ale może najpierw od tego zacznę, że właśnie tym razem przeżyłem bardzo mocno te modlitwy za sprawców i za obojętnych, bo nagle sobie przypomniałem, że w ostatnich dniach zawiodłem kogoś właśnie w taki sposób, że nie umiałem się wczuć w jego położenie, że widziałem rzecz tylko z własnej perspektywy, a nie z jej perspektywy. I że człowiek, którego nazywają teologiem dialogu, bo taką książkę o mnie napisali, w praktyce zawodzi, nie? Też. I że jakaś taka wdzięczność do wszystkich innych, którzy się modlą jedni za drugich, i o to uzdrowienie także wewnętrzne w drobnych międzyludzkich spotkaniach, które są tu i teraz, bo na te wielkie nie możemy mieć wpływu inaczej, jak tylko przez nasze własne decyzje. A potem było dla mnie też ciepłym zaskoczeniem, żeście mnie tu przyjęli, chociaż się spóźniłem o cały dzień, że od początku zostałem przedstawiony jako ktoś ważny, chociaż myślałem, że już właściwie to sobie płynę w kierunku spotkania z Haszem i nic mnie już tutaj nie czeka. Dziękuję.
Yeah, what second thing I discovered here was really the title of the center, because it's dialogue and prayer, and this is actually something we don't have in Protestantism. We would say dialogue and action, dialogue and founding initiatives, and there I think I have changed, and it started actually in Jerusalem in my 3 months. I told you a little bit at the table, because after 7th October, I was in contact with the Jewish people, the Jewish friends in Jerusalem or cooperation partners, but I was always also in a very close contact with the Palestinian Christians, the Protestants. Every day my walk, I walked in the old city around, and I knocked at the door, and I met the secretary or a pastor or something, and there I realized, and then Protestant action, we have to react. This event cannot destroy dialogue, all our efforts, everything we are working for. And so I tried to convince our Palestinian brothers and sisters, how about the idea we will now meet with some Jews on the other side, outside of from Rechavia or the Jewish quarters. It's so easy here, and there, because we have projects with them, they are open for this. And then I realized you cannot do this. You force them, and they are very polite towards me. So also the bishop, for example. But I after the third or fourth effort, I realized, no, it's not the time now, because they felt also very blessed by this. They were not tortured, they were not killed in this moment, but they had the same horror. They say the same feeling. That's something difficult to understand, but it was the case. The Palestinian Christians, especially those small Christian churches from the Palestinians. And then this was part of my decision. Now dialogue can only be saved by this phase, or this time for prayer, focusing on prayer, which is sort of the opposition of action, isn't it? It's prayer action. I think it's passive. It's something passive. Well, we can talk about this, but you want?
Yeah, or somebody else was.
I can share experience just at the last point, because with the CCJ of Poland, we had a big struggle to write a statement after the 7th of October, not because it was diverse, but to find the right words. It was very difficult. And we decided that on the 27th of October, we were almost ready with the statement, but we decided that we will do a prayer. And it was done by the Council of Christians and Jews and Council of the Catholics, the Common Council of the Catholics and Muslims in Poland. And we thought about it, and we decided that it won't be any speeches, there will be any reflection, only prayer. And when people were asking, but this is not an action, I said, standing in a situation like that in a public square in Warsaw together, and being able to stand together and pray together, it is an action. Because sometimes we knew that we discuss also, we can publish a common statement by the two councils. It was not possible. But prayer, because we use only sacred text, allowed us to be together and to take a stand, that we still want to continue, maybe not now through words, maybe not through other action, but we could do through prayer, be together. And it was a statement from us. We are together, we are able to stand together. And at this point, not everybody was able to stand together. Until now, I have friends that will not speak to one another and they will not stand together. So sometimes prayer, it is a statement. And actually prayer gives you the tool to say something that maybe you would not be able to find through the words or action.
I want to say two things. Firstly, that reflecting on the last couple of days, the moment between our Ukrainian participant and the Russian participant was a very strong moment. Now, again, these were not people with two opposing, views about the war, but they are people with different national identities that are locked in a war at the moment, and that was a strong moment. Altogether, I was extremely impressed. This is a man, the man from Ukraine who's spent 10 years in jail. He's really, and is clearly something of a hero of human rights in his country and beyond. So that was very powerful. I wanted to say that. I would say about prayer, in our language, in our tradition, the word for prayer, one of the words for prayer is avodah, which can also be translated as work. It comes from the world of the temple service, but it was work. Prayer in its ritual form in the temple was work. I think that putting prayer in the title, it raises the stakes, by which I mean the following. False prayer, empty prayer is worse than no prayer in these kind of situations. I was thinking a rabbi called Abraham Joshua Heschel, not the modern one, but his great-great-great-grandfather, Abraham Joshua Heschel of Apt, of Opatov, I don't know where that is in Poland, but he was Ovatów. He told the following story. He said that people come to him, the other rabbis, and they want to know why all of the people from the villages around, they come to him so that he will ask God to help them with their problems. So he says, I'll tell you what happens. Every time somebody comes to me with a problem, the problem puts a hole in my heart. And what do I do when I pray? I take my heart out and I show it to God. This heart full of holes. And that's, and you know, God is encouraged to respond, or whatever it might be. But that image of a prayer, not a kind of a beautiful decorum, serene, but prayer is what happens when you rip your heart out from your chest and you hold it up to God. That's even across the different liturgical traditions, that's important. I think it's risky. It must be a risky strategy to have prayer as part of the identity here, because false words, you know, the words of the liturgy that I could not really say in the camp begin with El Malei Rachamim, God full of mercy. That's those words. And the question of how you can possibly get those words, I mean, I physically, I couldn't quite do it, and then I sort of carried on. But again, to stand there and say those words because it's the tradition and you say them, and not to be bleeding when you say them would be somehow terrible. So I think that putting an emphasis on prayer is wonderful when it's wonderful, and it can also be banal and almost trivial. So I guess you have to walk that line.
I can say something to this, because my experience here is, at the age of Auschwitz, that it's difficult to pray superficially. Yeah, the memory is so strong that automatically you're thinking about what does our prayer mean here, and it's somehow not allowed to make prayers with empty words, because they would be offending the victims. But today, for example, when you were, sorry, how I read this, yeah. These two last prayers, so symbolically, the Kaddish, Emalei Rachamim, both, each word and the place where you were, we stood in the front of the gas chambers, was so real for you. Yeah, I felt this. And so every word, can I say this? Can I not? But I was inside, I was sure you will continue, you will finish, because this is something like the victory of life and of fidelity to them who also prayed, and to your identity, who you are. And so I had no problem just to wait. I was sure you will finish. Yeah, and it's clear that it is hard. Here, it's not easy. But this, for me, this sure that you would finish is an experience over, I'm 30 years here now, that so often I experience that this place is not killing us. It has a power of grace in it. It's very strange, but very often I get this feedback. I was so afraid to come here, but it was good that I came here. Yeah, and yeah, this is for me a great gift. This is what the symbol, the sun still exists, means. And yeah, and I felt to touch the place when we have a seminar here at the edge of Auschwitz about faith and nation. It's very important. It's important to touch this place without discussion, to go there with our very delicate prayers. The second station was silence, and gives another tone and another sincerity to what we are doing here afterwards, or before, in this context. And yeah. So
Jeszcze jedna taka myśl, którą teraz sobie uświadomiłem, że to spotkanie, na które się spóźniłem i tak dalej, i nie zawsze wszystko rozumiałem literalnie, to jednak spotkanie z twarzami tych, którzy mówili. I wyczucie, że są bardzo różne podejścia, młodych, starszych, kobiety, mężczyzn, bardziej entuzjastyczne, bardziej zatroskane, że to jest ogromne bogactwo i że to, że te wszystkie twarze się spotkały i to, co za nimi stoi, ci wszyscy ludzie, no przede wszystkim prelegenci, ale także uczestnicy tu na sali, że to jest, no to jest właśnie to bogactwo tych spotkań u progu Auschwitz.
And reflecting our conference, I'm really very glad that we could organize such a conference, and with coming you from Israel, Polish, German, Russian, Ukraine, and all together in a good atmosphere of trust. And this is also, of course, Chaplin, for example, is outside of Russia and in opposition, but nevertheless, it was a bridge, and so I feel very gifted by the mere present event that we were able to listen to one another. We somehow found the same level, waves, you say. And yeah, this for me is really a great gift, also a motivation to continue. I also wanted to say something about the lectures, because Faith and Nation, something which became clearer to me is because for many people, faith is home. So and people are looking for a home first before they understand what kind of faith it built. So people are in the youth group of the Protestant church because they feel good there, simply. They don't have a clue. People go to Israel because it's a homeland, yeah. Or refuge also. People went in communist time into the church because there they could feel Polish and speak Polish. Yeah, and people in Russia looking for an identity after fall of communism wants what can keep them together is some Orthodox tradition, the Russian Catholic. It's the home perspective is so important, and in Poland, this millennium we had 1,000 years of building this homeland for Poles with Catholic structures and visions also. It makes it very difficult to tell people, but you should change. Yeah, and so the religious aspect in these homelands should also be empowerment to set free from the homeland. Yeah, because only then I can take a critical stance. And so the source which had inside the resistance people who were ready to give their lives, what was this? This is also was for me, or still is, a very important question or issue, which gave me to think here. Yeah, I wanted to add.
And there, I think, without instrumentalizing the Jewish religion, but Judaism has a very important role to Christianity in this point. This was a little bit your question too at this last lecture, because it's for the Christian tradition a big reminder that we are all on the way finally to Zion, which is a different homeland, which is not Germany or Poland or Christian Europe or something. And this is very important. It's part of our Bible. It's not only Isaiah. It's in all the prophets. You find those visions. Now I have to preach. I'm preparing a predication about Zechariah 8. That's a fascinating vision I have already where they say 10 men from all the people of the world are taking the Gewandsaum, the hem of a Jewish Ish Yehudi to follow him to Zion. And so, this is, I think this is, that's why I insist a little bit that this dialogue, and especially also Jewish-Christian relations and dialogue, has a very essential role also within our own processes as churches. as churches. I think, yeah.
My last question, and what now? So, do we have a vision about where to go?
Again, I think it's needs a little more time to percolate and to think about it. It might be practically a good idea to convene us in some way in a few weeks' time. In other words, I wouldn't let it dissipate or dissolve. You need it, but on the other hand, I would be nervous about translating this immediately into, a great big program. We're all, at least in my reality, we're just trying to get through from one week to the next in this current situation. But I do have the instinct that, well, both intellectually, I mean, the quality of the presentations and getting a picture of how the theme that was chosen, I just learnt quite a lot about the ways in which these issues play out. So to do more of that would be interesting, but also the more kind of spiritually dynamic aspects of this. It would be interesting to think how to move it forward. I've done too many institutional processes where the question of what next then leads to a great elaborate planning mechanism that doesn't. So I don't think we should do that, but I do think to allow this to kind of to settle and to think what it means. I'm very impressed by this facility. It's a fantastic setting, although, as was, I came because of Oświęcim, is the truth, but also found it difficult to come for the same reason. But I think what you've built here is it does provide a possibility for a space in which people could come and learn and share and pray and all of that. But I'm not ready at this point to sort of unfold a plan. I don't have a plan.
Well, you are so inspiring. Excuse me that I take again the micro, because Auschwitz, well, the location could be more. This would be interesting for me to reflect more. How do we discuss a topic like this at Oświęcim, so close to this, because and this is a very actual topic, yeah, because in Germany now we have, not only in the society, also in a lot of church communities, long debates about post-colonial approaches and the role of Holocaust memory. You know this. It's intellectual debate, but it's not only intellectual debate in the newspapers. It's really, for example, I have one colleague in a city in Kleve. They have traditionally always celebrating the 11th November, 9th November and 27th January at the place where the old synagogues was. And now the city has changed. There are African communities, there are Muslim communities, and they want to build on this place a house of many cultures. So they start now in this small city of Kleve a highly philosophical debate. What's about post-colonialism and Holocaust? And this, I think this is also in the topic of nation and faith in it somehow. It was a little bit a pity that the last speaker, who was in mission theology, didn't talk about those colonial heritage we all have in our churches, and maybe this could be a good place to reflect this.
We should probably wrap this up. I'm getting up in a minute to go to get on the train, but I just will mention something. It was a very male, it was an exclusively male panel, and that's something that would, if we're going to go forward, we would really need to address. I hadn't. Again, I was kind of overwhelmed by the possibility of coming to Oświęcim. Didn't think anything about anything else or check the program. I mean, as I say, the program was wonderful, but would need to address, I think, if we're going to go forward, how we can address that question. I just wanted to make that point. But I'm very grateful for the invitation and the opportunity, and it's been a remarkable experience.
Let's this be the final statement. Thank you very much.